Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Several leaders of Iraqi election slates and government officials call on the High Elections Commission to take the necessary steps to guarantee the transparency of the voting process. Meanwhile, some officials had warned of the possibility of fraud in the legislative elections. This comes as the Election High Commission denied an allegation that it had confiscated hundreds of thousands of election identification cards prepared in advance in Iran, adding that these reports are inaccurate and baseless and only intended to disrupt Iraqi confidence in the elections.
Most Iraqis decided to take part in the intense election battle regardless of their political, secular, and religious differences. It is estimated that 15.5 million Iraqis have registered to vote in the 18 voting districts, which are equivalent to the number of Iraqi cities.
في هذه الانتخابات يتنافس 7,655.
In these elections, 7,655 candidates will compete for 275 parliamentary seats, of which 230 will be set for the municipalities. And the remaining 45 seats, known as national seats, will be given for those parties that do not win any seats in the municipalities, but win many votes at the national level.
وتحصل على عدد كبير من الأصوات على المستوى الوطني. مدة عملية الانتخاب 10 ساعات بدءا من الساعة 7 صباحا.
The elections will be 10 hours long, starting at 7 a.m. and ending at 5 p.m. local time, and will be overseen by 800 national supervisors, in addition to 120,000 local supervisors. What also distinguishes these elections is that the Sunnis did not turn their backs to them, as they did to the previous elections. The Sunnis are also hoping that they can regain some of their political weight in the Iraqi stage. Some of the most prominent parties and coalitions that will run in the elections are
الائتلاف العراقي الموحد ويترأسه عبد العزيز الحكيم.
The United Iraqi Alliance, led by Abdulaziz Hakim and backed by the Grand Shiite Authority Ali Sistani, and encompasses 18 different Shiite groups. In the past elections, this alliance received half the votes. This alliance, however, did not enter these elections with the same political weight, because some parties split from it. In their elections platform, they confirmed the importance of security, leadership, and rebuilding Iraq. They also promised to end oppression and corruption. The United Kurdish Alliance consists of 8 groups, but only 2 groups are predominant, which are the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, led by Jalal Talabani, and the Kurdistan Democratic Party, led by Masoud al-Barazani. The United Kurdish Alliance prioritizes finding a solution for the Kirkuk problem, which the Kurds and the Turkmen wish to maintain control over. The United Kurdish Alliance vowed to increase the area of Kurdistan so it would include cities that are historically tied with the Kurds. The Iraqi List Alliance is made up of 15 groups and is led by Iyad Allawi. The party does not commit along sectarian lines, as it encompasses the Communist Party as well as Shiite and Sunni individuals. The Iraqi List Alliance vowed to form a strong central government and to fight rebellion, and to reconsider laws for rooting out the Baathists, and enlisting more former officers from the Iraqi forces within the new Iraqi army. The Iraqi Unity Front consists of 3 principal Arab Sunni parties that boycotted the previous elections, which are the Iraqi People's Conference, the Iraqi Islamic Party, and the National Dialogue Council. The front vows to work on materializing the withdrawal of foreign forces from Iraq and to maintain the security through dialogue and to give back the Iraqi officers their positions. It also seeks to amend parts of the constitution, especially those that grant provinces lots of authority. The Elections High Commission vowed that the elections would continue with transparency and precision, and confirmed that counting the votes would continue by the most modern electronic means, and then the elections results will be inspected and verified by experts from the United Nations. The High Election Commission has allocated 3 days for submitting legal refutations to the results.
في إيران شهدت الدوائر الانتخابية إقبالاً واسعاً من قبل الجالية العراقية.
There was a large turnout of Iraqi nationals at the polling stations in Iran to cast their ballots in the legislative elections that will last until Thursday. There were no reports of incidents.
Thousands of Iraqi nationals in Tehran and 7 other Iranian cities headed to polling stations to cast their votes in the Iraqi legislative elections that will last until Thursday. Among the 15 foreign countries that held Iraqi elections, Iran had ranked at the top of the list in terms of the number of polling stations available. There are 16 voting districts in 8 Iranian cities, which are Qum, Mashhad, Maqdistan, Tehran, Ahwaz, Ilyam, Asfahan, Oromia, Kershah, where the largest Iraqi community lives.
As you know, during previous elections, Iraqi voter turnout was higher in Iran than it was in any other country. In this election, I also expect a high voter turnout. The Iraqis in Iran are looking forward to casting their votes and seeing the political process move forward.
The Election High Commission, which is working under the auspices of the United Nations, is monitoring the election process to root out any fraud or foul play. The representatives of the 222 election slates are also taking part in monitoring the voting process to guarantee a fair election.
Dozens of monitors arrived here at 7:30 a.m. with proper identifications and badges. I do not know their exact number, but I think it is between 20 and 30 members, and the number may increase. We will welcome and will cooperate with any political official who would like to come and monitor these elections.
There are currently 150,000 Iraqis living in Iran. They had escaped the oppression and atrocities of the ousted regime of Saddam Hussein, and 100,000 of those Iraqi immigrants have the right to vote.
We must come together to defend Iraq against the terrorists of the former regime of Saddam. Iraqis must intensify their efforts to combat these criminals for the sake of Islam.
We must vote for our candidates who will look after our country. We have been subjected to oppression and tyranny for a long time.
My advice to the Iraqi people is to exercise caution and not to trust the Baathists, who violated, subjugated, and oppressed the people of Iraq for decades. The world agrees with us that those members of the former regime are oppressors, cruel, and merciless. And I voice my opinion without fear.
Many Iraqis in the previous election had voted in favor of the United Iraqi Alliance. Amidst heavy security presence, voters were able to cast their ballots freely and without any problems whatsoever. As these rounds of elections abroad got underway, Iraqi coalitions and parties are getting ready to join the race towards parliamentary seats. The high turnout of voters among Iraqi communities abroad reflect the high level of their concern to take part in the political process in Iraq, which is passing through rough times. Nabih Dahruzan, Tehran, Al-Alam.
The Secretary General of the Islamic Party, Mr. Tariq Al-Hashimi, accused the government and other entities and political parties with violations and practices he considered immoral and irresponsible in regards to elections preparation. In a press conference, Al-Hashimi said that he opposes and has reservations for the emergency law, which was imposed on the two provinces, Nawa and Anbar, because it would allow for violations to the elections law. Al-Hashimi hoped that all of the border passages would close, especially those that allowed numerous nationals to pass through with forged documents so they could participate in the elections. Civil society organizations voiced their concern for the increased violence before the upcoming elections, and the Iraqi Network for Nonviolence said that the acts of violence may cause voters to panic. Reem Zayed has this report.
5 days before the election day, competition has been intensifying among different election slates, and some are using violence as a way to win. This was a source of concern for civil society organizations, compelling them to find ways to decrease the levels of violence during the elections, such as monitoring and documenting this violence that may ruin and derail election processes. Members of civil society organizations confirm that citizens' choices are based on their convictions and that the violence plays no role in what choices they make, adding that violence will not end in one day.
We do not have a democratic culture because we do not have a history of democracy. This makes matters confusing, and it makes it difficult for people to know what they can and cannot do. For example, some people view ripping down election posters as a minor issue, but we document this as an act of violence. This is an attempt to marginalize others, and it is an extension of the old mentality. Of course, many people do not realize this. The history of violence in Iraq goes way back and will not end easily.
Elections observers expressed concern that violence may cause citizens to panic and prevent them from arriving to the election booths. However, they praised the responsiveness of different political parties calling to stop the levels of violence.
The people attending were political officials and representatives from non-governmental organizations, as well as civil society organizations responsible for monitoring the elections. They are helping to stop the violence.
The Interior Ministry said that what appears to be violence is nothing more than political disputes, calling on officials to put public interests ahead of everything else.
We hope that responsibility towards citizens and homeland would be prioritized over any other personal interests. There are laws and regulations that were produced by the Higher Election Commission in charge of overseeing the elections in Iraq. These regulations must be respected and obeyed, and anyone who violates them will be persecuted according to the law.
Efforts are being exerted to monitor the elections process. However, little effort has been put forth to resolve political, ethnic, and sectarian struggles during the elections. Some observers believe that this may have negative impacts on the election process. Reem Zaid, Al-Sumeria TV, Baghdad.
A leading politician has been shot dead in Iraq. The killing comes just 2 days before the country's general election. Iraqi Free Progressive Party leader Mizhar Dulaimi was shot while campaigning in the western town of Ramadi. 3 of his bodyguards were wounded in the attack. Mr. Dulaimi had appeared on the television the previous night, urging Iraqis to take part in the elections. Iraqis living abroad have already begun casting their votes. Expatriates have until Thursday to vote in polling stations in 15 nations. More than 1 million Iraqis are eligible to vote abroad. Organisers are expecting a higher turnout than the January polls, when only a quarter of expatriates voted.
I am voting to ensure my rights and the rights of my children. No, I did not vote last time. We made a mistake last time by not voting, and we want to rectify our mistake.
I hope that the next government is balanced. This government was not balanced since a group of Iraqis did not participate. I hope that this time the parliament will be balanced and for everyone to have Iraq's benefit as its priority, not the benefits of a faction or a front.
Some 15 million Iraqis went to the polls today to cast ballots in a historic parliamentary election that many hope will build democracy, restore security and lay the groundwork for an American troop withdrawal. Iraqis voted at some 33,000 polling stations, choosing from among 19 coalitions, representing some 900 party lists. Despite unprecedented security measures, violence continued on election day. However, the scattered violence was far less than expected and did not seem to discourage Iraqis from going to the polls. Today's election is the third nationwide vote in less than a year and the final stage of a US-backed process to install democracy and restore full sovereignty to Iraq. Staying with today's historic elections in Iraq, a short time ago, IBA's Leah Stern spoke with Jerusalem Post reporter Matthew Gutman, who is in northern Iraq covering the elections.
The Shiite majority is going to be the big winner. Iraq consists of 60% Shia. Most of them live in the south. But the Kurdish party is slated to do very well. It could come in second. And there are a vast number of other parties. There are 19 coalitions representing over 600 parties. So there's certainly a lot to choose from. But again, I stress that most people seem to be going for the ethnic line. The Kurds vote for Kurdish parties. Sunni Arabs, by and large, vote for Sunni parties, and the Shiites almost entirely vote for Shiite-led parties.
There have been reports of violence in Iraq. Has it discouraged people from voting?
Most people here, at least those that we've talked to, have voted. And you can see it because their left forefinger has indelible ink on it. People are very excited about the vote, especially in northern Iraq. Here there have been jubilant dances in the streets, there's celebratory gunfire, and people seem actually very hopeful for their future. They think that these elections can bring change, and more importantly, that they can bring them some security.
You're currently in a Kurdish area, and you wrote in the Post that for Kurds, democracy is the best revenge. What do you mean by that?
Most Kurds don't necessarily understand what democracy means. For them, it is gaining power. For them, it is voting for the leaders that brought them to this point. 15 years ago, the Kurds were kicked out, or thousands of Kurds were kicked out of Kurdistan in an offensive by Saddam Hussein. They have returned, they created an autonomous region in the north, and now they even have a Kurdish president. This has totally changed the worldview, and they think that elections and the American democracy here is their salvation.
But Matt, can democracy really work in a diverse country as Iraq with no experience in the democratic process?
I don't think that democracy can work right away, but it will take a few years, and after those years pass and these initial trials with democracy hopefully succeed, I think that there can be democracy. I'm here in Kirkuk, and it's a mixed city. We just talked to a man who is a Sunni Arab who married a Kurdish woman, and he's voting for a candidate, he said, who represents all of Iraqis, someone who is not just ethnically based, and that's what he thinks democracy is about. So there is some movement forward and some progress in people's understanding of what it means to vote and what democracy could mean for them in the future.
Palestinians in the main West Bank cities were voting today in elections seen as a final dress rehearsal for next month's parliamentary contests between Hamas and the ruling Fatah faction. Voting began at 7 a.m. and polling booths were due to close 12 hours later, according to the local election commission. Around 148,000 Palestinians were entitled to vote in today's elections for 414 council seats. About 1/5 of the 1,321 candidates are women. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas was among voters expected to cast their ballot in the town of Al-Birri, which adjoins Ramallah. The election pits Abbas' dominant Fatah party against the group Hamas, which has enjoyed a strong showing in the 3 earlier rounds of voting. Earlier ballots were held in towns and villages where local issues and tribal affiliations were the main factors determining how people voted. This round will take place in 40 municipalities, including the largest West Bank city of Nablus, Jenin and Ramallah, headquarters of the Palestinian Authority. Israel launched 2 airstrikes against militant targets across the Gaza Strip early today, demolishing 2 buildings used by Palestinian militants but causing no casualties. In the first incident, an Israeli missile plowed into the home of a Palestinian militant in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, causing massive damage to the building. Security sources said the missile struck the home of Amir Karmout, a militant with the Popular Resistance Committees, although medical sources said only 1 person was slightly injured in the blast. Shortly afterwards, another Israeli missile slammed into a 3-story building in the center of the southern city of Rafah, which lies on the border with Egypt. The building, which housed the offices of a charity run by the group Jihad, suffered heavy damage, but there were no reports of any casualties. It was the second time within 6 months that the charity had been targeted in an Israeli air raid. Korean anti-globalization activists who had skirmished for 2 days with police during Hong Kong's WTO meeting turned to prayer today in hopes of bringing a divine end to the global trade talks. Leaders of the demonstrators warned, however, that the lull would be temporary and that tomorrow they would return to the serious business of trying to fight through police lines to reach World Trade Organization delegates. Led by the Korean Peasants League, hundreds of members of farmer and union groups marched towards the meeting venue today, stopping to kneel and pray every 3 steps along the route. The farmer fear that the free trade in farm goods will flood the Korean rice market with cheap foreign imports, putting their livelihoods at risk. An emergency sitting of Parliament passed special laws today, allowing Sydney police to lock down parts of Australia's biggest city to stop racial unrest. After 2 nights of racial violence in Sydney's beachside suburbs this week, the New South Wales State Parliament also increased the penalty for rioting from 10 to 15 years and doubled the sentence for affray to 10 years. Sydney's racial violence erupted at Cronulla last Sunday when some 3,000 people, some yelling racist chants, attacked people of Middle East appearance, saying they were defending their beach from Lebanese youth gangs. Police said white supremacists incited violence at Cronulla. Racist mobile telephone text messages and emails continue to circulate calling for violence this Sunday, despite calls from leaders of surfing and Arab Muslims communities for calm.
The report by Detlef Melis, the head of the International Investigative Committee on the assassination of the late Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, which newly accused Syria of not cooperating with the committee, provoked angry public reactions, prompting the international community to call for a review of its dealings with Damascus. Melis accused Syria of procrastinating in its cooperation with the investigation committee. A Syrian member of the parliament said that Damascus exerted all possible efforts to facilitate the work of the committee, and he reiterated his country's readiness to continue to cooperate with the committee in the future.
Syria is pointing the finger at a third party, Israel, which was ignored in Detlef Mellis's second report and which was not much different from the past report. Syria openly pointed to Israel, as was confirmed by the political analyst Fayed al-Sayegh, who said that 400 Mossad agents are moving freely and renting homes in Beirut. This was reported in the Financial Times newspaper, but was completely ignored by the German judge Mellis. He did not pursue this issue at all.
These agents do not necessarily speak Hebrew. They speak Arabic. Why weren't they pointed out in any way? Why is nobody mentioning the role of the proxy Lebanese government residing in Jerusalem, which is made up of the remaining southern Lebanese army, some of whom surrendered and others of whom escaped inside of Israel? They form a terrorist, mafia-like intelligence network linked with Mossad and working with local elements inside of Lebanon.
المخابراتية المرتبطة بالموساد يتعاملون مع عناصر الداخل في الداخل اللبناني.
وفي تطور آخر على صعيد حسام طاهر حسام فقد أطلعنا موكله القانوني.
In another development, Hussam Tahir Hussam's lawyer Amran al-Zarbi informed us that he received a letter from Hussam's brother revealing that an unknown security agency requested that he cooperate with them by claiming that Syrian intelligence have pressured Hussam and his family, causing Idris Hussam, his brother, to write a letter, sign it, using his fingerprints, and present it legally through his lawyer, Mr. Zarbi.
In this letter, Idris says that he received a phone call from an international phone number. The person talked to him in Arabic with a Lebanese accent. This person said that he belongs to an international organization. He did not identify the nationality of this organization or the name of the organization or its field of work. He said that he tried to call the witness Hussam, but they had difficulty doing this. They wanted him to cooperate with them by claiming that the Syrian Authority and intelligence agency is putting pressure on Hussam and his family. In case Idris agreed, the man asked him to set a time and place and how he could cooperate. Of course, at this point, Idris ended the conversation and he informed me about it. He gave me this written letter, which we will naturally submit in a legal way.
As the Security Council deliberates, the Lebanese statements and accusations have gone over the limits to the level of insulting the Syrian regime, especially the statements of Walid Jumblat, who previously knocked on Syrian doors, but nobody received him because he is known for his changing political positions.
سوريا أغلقت كافة النوافذ أمام جنبلاط.
Syria cut off all its contacts with Jumblat, so he found himself facing a wall without any place to turn. Naturally, sometimes suicide becomes a way of self-defense. I think Walid Jumblat is committing a political suicide, though slowly. Let him say whatever he wants.
Meanwhile, the Syrian public continues to hold its breath, anticipating and fearing that sanctions may be imposed or that their country will continue to be the target of endless persecution by the international community. However, some people see that a solution may be near.
If the investigation committee is extended for 6 more months, that alone is a sanction on Syria.
Yesterday we saw the Mellis report. What did he add? He didn't add anything new. It's become a joke. The best thing to do is to maintain previous positions.
According to observers, just as Syria cooperated slowly, according to Mellis, Syria will slowly get out of the cycle of accusations, despite the fact that the international pressure and persecution continues to target Syria from all sides.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.